Hello everyone, this is Branden Haize, and today I thought I'd give you all a quick look at my movie collection. It's not the biggest library on the planet, but it's large enough to justify making this video. I'm going to feature this whole collection in screenshots of 3 movies or more. That way I won't waste a lot of time burning through all the titles individually, and I'll try to limit any comments I make to just 1 movie per screenshot. Also, I should apologize in advance for the quality of some of these images. The only camera I own is part of my phone, so shit may look a bit blurry. But unfortunately, this is the best I can do. American Psycho was my first introduction to Christian Bale. I've probably seen this movie about 100 times, and yet it's still debatable how the movie should be interpreted. Is there a clear-cut meaning behind this film? Who knows? I never read through the actual book, but the movie is still a fun watch regardless, even if it doesn't make complete sense. The titles on some of these movie covers are a bit hard to read, like the Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie for example. So I've gone ahead and highlighted some of those so you can tell what you're looking at. The Aqua Teens, much like YouTube videos, work best in lengths of 15 minutes or less, which is why this movie failed, and it's also why this lengthy YouTube video of mine is probably not going to be a huge hit either. I just picked up my copy of Barbed Wire Dolls a few days ago. I wasn't previously familiar with Jess Franco's work, but I'll definitely be diving deeper into his filmography in the future. Beer Fest is easily my favorite movie from the Broken Lizard comedy troupe. If you're a struggling alcoholic, you shouldn't watch this movie, because it makes the problem seem like a goddamn superpower. The 1988 version of The Blob is one of the few examples of why we can't hate all remakes. Sometimes remakes are handled well, and executed in a way that helps them surpass the original. That's almost never the case, but when it works, it works. Blue Velvet is the only David Lynch movie I own. I think his work is generally overrated for the most part. Basically, it's only weird for the sake of being weird. I doubt even Lynch himself understands what he's filming half the time. But Dennis Hopper's performance alone makes Blue Velvet a must-see film. Bug is a really interesting film, but I'm not sure why I own it, to be perfectly honest. It's not something I'd ever really want to watch a second time around. If you want to see Ashley Judd and Michael Shannon descend into utter madness for roughly an hour and a half, then you should probably rent this flick. I can't recommend buying it though. Cowboy Bebop the movie is one of the few anime titles I own. I'm not really a big fan of the genre. I find most of it unappealing. But Cowboy Bebop was an awesome television series, and the movie was basically just a kick-ass supersized episode. I think I love the premise of the Cube movies more than the actual films themselves, but the first 2 are certainly enjoyable. Part 3 goes completely off the rails, and I don't even know if there are more sequels beyond that. But if you want to see a handful of strangers try to escape a giant killer puzzle box, Cube and Hypercube might be worth looking into. The Dark Crystal is one of my favorite childhood movies. It's so unique, not to mention super creepy and disgusting. It really made a lasting impression on me, but unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever see movies like this get made again. At least not for children. Modern parents seem a bit too uptight and protective against this kind of content. The 2004 version of Dawn of the Dead is yet another example of a remake done well. I know I'm going to get a lot of shit for saying this, but I actually don't even like the original. It has bikers throwing whipped cream pies at zombies, for crying out loud. That's about as far from scary as you could possibly get. If you take a look back at entertainment from the 1970s, movies and television shows were absolutely obsessed with Satan worship and black magic. You'd think it was a real-world epidemic. The Devil's Reign is easily one of the more ridiculous films from that time period. Stallone's Judge Dredd movie from 1995 was pure garbage. When the property was rebooted in 2012, not many people seemed to care, probably assuming the new movie would be more of the same old bullshit. That's a real shame because Dredd is a fucking awesome movie, and I would have loved to see this branch off into sequels. The Entity is a paranormal movie where actress Barbara Hershey gets repeatedly raped by a ghost. The scenes are quite graphic too, so I definitely don't recommend it for everyone. It's funny to note, however, that 20th Century Fox was planning to make a video game based on the film. The project was wisely cancelled at the last moment, but you can still emulate the game and play it online. Farscape was my favorite science fiction show and easily the best thing the stupid Syfy channel ever produced. I hated that it was cancelled prematurely, but the Peacekeeper Wars miniseries was eventually produced and helped to tie up all the loose ends. When I was a kid, I would rent any movie that featured Christopher Lambert. Of course, I called him Lambert back then because I didn't know any better. Fortress is probably his best work, and Fortress 2 Re-Entry is a pretty decent sequel. On IMDb, Frailty is listed under crime, drama, and thriller. I'd also throw horror into the mix just for good measure. It's an outstanding movie. I've seen it countless times, and I've never grown tired of watching it. It's usually priced pretty cheap too. I see it in the $5 discount movie bins all the time. I typically don't like horror comedy flicks, mainly because they're just made stupid on purpose for cheap laughs, but The Frighteners is a legitimately good movie. It has its fair share of funny moments, but the underlying story is strong. It's really unique and engaging, and Michael J. Fox's performance is probably his best work since Back to the Future. It's funny that I've got The Godfather and Goodfellas in this shot, but I'm choosing to focus on Groundhog Day instead. Aside from Ghostbusters and What About Bob, Groundhog Day is probably Bill Murray's best work. I've seen movies and TV shows work off the same basic premise, where a character gets stuck in a time loop of sorts, but it's difficult to keep that repetition interesting. Groundhog Day is great from start to finish. I took all these pictures for my own personal records. There are a few movies I own that I didn't want to show on YouTube. It's mostly that artsy porno from the 1970s that has actual storylines, but, at the end of the day, it's still hardcore fucking too, so I just decided to censor those out instead of having to fight against YouTube community guidelines. The Hellraiser franchise currently has 9 movies, with a reboot supposedly on the way. I think many of the later films are total garbage, but the first 4 are fairly solid. They're not flawless, certainly, but they're worth checking out in my opinion. Hopefully that reboot will be worth a shit. I fucking love Joe Bob Briggs. Watching him on late night television back in the day was like attending the world's greatest film school, taught by the world's coolest teacher. He's done a handful of commentaries on various DVDs. Unfortunately, many of them are out of print and super expensive. I'd like to own all of them someday, but that's going to take a while. I was always a fan of Mike Judge, dating back to his work on Beavis and Butthead. When Office Space came out, Judge reached godlike status in my book. I think that movie is pure genius from start to finish. That's why I bought his next movie, Idiocracy, sight unseen. At first, I hated it, because I guess I was expecting another Office Space. It's kind of unfair to compare the two, however, and after repeated viewings, Idiocracy started to grow on me. The It's Alive saga is a strange little trilogy, created by writer-director Larry Cohen. One of these days, I'm going to own his entire filmography. The guy has a gift for filmmaking that'll just never be duplicated. In this particular series, women are giving birth to these little mutant monsters. The authorities do their best to contain the epidemic, but a lot of people die in the process. I don't want to say anything more because I don't want to spoil it, but this DVD 3-pack isn't too expensive. You should buy a copy for Mother's Day. Leaving Las Vegas is a heartwarming tale about an alcoholic who slowly drinks himself to death. It was the most feel-good movie of 1995. Let Me Die a Woman is a rather unique documentary from 1977. It covers various topics on the transsexual spectrum and shows actual footage of a sex change operation being performed. I think it was supposed to be helpful for the time to spread public awareness on the subject, but the film also has a very dirty exploitation feel to it. I don't know, you can watch it yourself and make your own judgment calls. Lord of Illusions is my favorite Clive Barker movie. I never hear anyone talk about it though. I'm not exactly sure why. It didn't make a lot of money, so maybe it just flew underneath everyone's radar. Magic is a crazy movie where a young Anthony Hopkins is on the verge of becoming a big-time celebrity ventriloquist. His career starts to fall apart, however, when it's revealed that he's a schizophrenic who talks to his dummy like it's a real person. It's not exactly the most original premise in the world, but there's a lot of great actors in this movie that help make it worthwhile. I'm not a Stephen King fan, but he's written about 10 billion books, so it's inevitable that I'd end up liking a couple of them. I never actually read Misery itself, but the movie is fantastic. To this day, I still have difficulty watching that hobbling scene. The Mist is a Stephen King story I've actually read. It's fairly short, so it was released in an anthology book. In my opinion, it's the best thing he's ever written, and the movie is an excellent adaptation. Jet Li's The One is a fun action movie if you check your brain at the door. It's full of plot holes and dumb character moments, but no one really watches Jet Li expecting to see Shakespeare. 1 Hour Photo is Robin Williams' best work, followed closely by 2002's Insomnia remake. I really liked his dark and dramatic roles over his goofy, zany comedy act. Perfume is an amazing movie where a guy with a heightened sense of smell chooses a career in perfume manufacturing. He becomes obsessed with trying to capture the smell of a woman, more or less, and ultimately that turns him into a murderer. Porn of the Dead is one of the few pornographic titles I've left visible in this slideshow. The cover is fairly tame, so it is easy to cover out the bad parts. I've talked about this movie before in a previous low score episode. I bought it when DVD pornos were brand new, so they were all way overpriced. That sticker is the actual price I paid. I left it on the case so I'd always be ashamed. It's a horrible movie, by the way. The girls are all painted up in zombie makeup, so they look disgusting. And there's nothing appealing about watching porno guys bang zombies. Quills is probably the best movie Geoffrey Rush has ever done. It basically makes the Marquis de Sade a hero by having him champion a war against censorship. It's a fictional account of his life, so no one should go in expecting concrete historical accuracy, but the script even states that itself in the opening dialogue. Return to Frogtown is part of the Hell Comes to Frogtown trilogy. Honestly, none of these films are any good. In fact, they were only purchased years ago as a joke. I still, to this day, haven't managed to sit through the final film, Toad Warrior. It's some shot-on-shitty piece of garbage that's so bad, I'd probably have to pay disposal fees in order to get rid of it. Speaking of bad movies, I love the original RoboCop, but parts 2 and 3 are damn near unwatchable. I only own the sequels because I fished them out of a dollar bin one day. Even at $1 a piece, I probably paid too much. Scanners is a great film by David Cronenberg, if you can manage to tolerate Stephen Lack's lack of acting ability. He's the main character, and even the background extras do a better job than him. Some people will defend Lack and say he's acting super wooden on purpose, but I'm not buying that. Still, Michael Ironside picks up the slack and makes the film work as a whole. For some reason, I own the entire Silent Night, Deadly Night series. The last 3 movies are so bad they didn't even get DVD releases. They're still stuck on VHS. Never have I seen a franchise stray further from its source material than these movies do. I can maybe recommend watching this stuff on the holidays, but you need to be absolutely hammered on eggnog to enjoy them. Special Effects is another Larry Cohen gem from 1984. It's basically about a creepy movie director who wants to make a legitimate snuff film. There's not much more to say here except that there's ample amounts of nudity from the late Zoe Lund. I remember liking the first 2 Spider-Man movies quite a bit, though I haven't seen them in years. They might not hold up now when compared to the films Marvel's been releasing lately. I know that CGI is terrible, that's for sure. I never liked the computer effects in these films when they were new, and I guarantee it looks even worse by today's standards. Spider-Man 3 is enjoyable, but in all the wrong ways. I'm looking forward to that Spider-Man Homecoming reboot. The Stuff is yet another Larry Cohen film. It's a horror movie about killer ice cream that attacks people like the Blob and takes over their bodies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. To make a truly awful joke, this movie is an acquired taste. I can totally understand why some people wouldn't like it. There's that goddamn copy of Toad Warrior I can't stand. The worst movie of 1996. The IMDb rating is 2.9, and that's way too high. I've done a wide variety of drugs in the past. Fortunately, heroin wasn't one of them. I think Trainspotting kept me far, far away. This movie doesn't exactly glorify the junk, to say the least. I can't really say the Underworld movies are good, but I own them, mainly because of Kate Beckinsale. She's not in the prequel, Rise of the Lycans, but there's a sort of Beckinsale clone that takes her place. The 4th movie was beyond ridiculous, so I didn't buy it. Still, I'm sure I'll watch the 5th movie, Blood Wars, when it gets released in 2017. I haven't watched any of these 3 movies yet. I bought them about a month ago, and I've been waiting to watch them with my brother, but neither of us have had the time, unfortunately, so I can't really say much about them. I first stumbled across Killer Clowns from Outer Space in my local video store. I begged my parents to rent it for me, and they did, but they told me I couldn't watch it until they watched it first. They wanted to make sure it wasn't inappropriate for a kid my age. I was maybe 8 or 9 at the time, I can't recall. Anyway, they decided I wasn't allowed to watch it, but then they left the house to have dinner with friends or something. Naturally, I secretly watched the movie unsupervised, and I thought it was the greatest movie ever made. My parents found out somehow, and I was grounded, but it was totally worth it. The Sinful Dwarf is a really twisted piece of cinema from the early 1970s. It's about a dwarf and his mother who kidnap women, get them addicted to drugs, and force them into prostitution. The Blu-ray has a XXX cut of the film that shows actual sex acts being performed, so I guess it doubles as pornography, though I wouldn't call the sex very erotic. Grace is a movie from 2009 about a mother who gives birth to a zombie, more or less, and then has to feed it blood in order to keep it animated. There are a few gruesome scenes, most notably anything involving breastfeeding, but aside from that, the film mostly focuses on the mother character and her descent into madness. She goes to crazy extremes to care for her child. I have a few older DVDs in my collection that came in those awful cardboard cases with the crummy plastic hinges. God, those things were such an awful design. None of these DVDs are the double-sided ones that need to be flipped, though, thankfully. I purged my collection of that junk a long time ago. Soylent Green is a popular sci-fi mystery movie from 1973. It's been referenced and spoofed by countless other movies and television shows. Most everyone knows the twist ending at this point, so they often assume the movie isn't worth watching today. But that couldn't be any further from the truth. It's an excellent film and easily one of Charlton Heston's best roles. Dark City is one of my favorite films of all time, and that's why it's a shame that I own such a crappy version of it. I really need to upgrade to the Blu-ray Director's Cut sometime soon. I honestly don't know why I haven't already. In the Mouth of Madness is perhaps John Carpenter's best movie. It's definitely the one I've watched the most of his entire filmography. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. If you're looking for a good, one-of-a-kind horror movie, don't even bother to watch the trailer. Just jump in blind and you'll probably have a fun time. Unbreakable is the only M. Night Shyamalan movie I like. I've watched a lot of crappy M. Night movies hoping he'd hit another home run like Unbreakable, but they were all a complete waste of time. Oh, and before anyone asks, no, I haven't seen The Sixth Sense. By the time I even knew who M. Night was, that movie had been spoiled to death. I just didn't think it was worth watching since I already knew the twist. I'm a total sucker for the horror subgenre that involves innocent people getting stranded in remote locations only to get attacked by rabid mutants or twisted hillbillies. The Hills Have Eyes is one of the better entries in this category. The original and the remake are so similar in my opinion that I don't think one is really any better than the other. They're both equally the same. Kids in the Hall Brain Candy is hands down my favorite comedy film of all time. I can't recommend it highly enough, though I realize that the comedy style itself is a very acquired taste. Perhaps only fans of the Kids in the Hall television show can truly appreciate how hilarious it is. The plot, in its simplest form, is about a pharmaceutical company that rushes an antidepressant to the public, only to realize too late that it's put some users into comas. The scientist who created the drug wants to expose the truth, while the pharmaceutical company wants to bury it. A lot of lives are destroyed, and hilarity ensues. Child Bride is an old exploitation film from 1938. According to the people who made it, it was an attempt to teach backwoods hillbillies about the immorality of marrying underage girls. I don't know how prevalent that problem actually was, but this film insinuates it was a full-blown epidemic. It's famously a film that was outright rejected by the crew of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Hell Comes to Frogtown. There it is, the lone film that kicked off the entire wretched Frogtown trilogy. In a post-apocalyptic world, Rowdy Roddy Piper stars as Sam Hell, one of the last few potent men on Earth. His Franken beans are seized by the government, and he's ordered to procreate with women in order to help repopulate the planet. There are some mutant frog humanoids in the movie too, hence the title. IMDb currently rates this flick at a 5.5. Amityville 2, The Possession, is about a guy who gets possessed by an evil entity, and then that persuades him to have sex with his sister. His sister's totally willing to reciprocate, but she has no supernatural excuse. She's just hot for incest, I guess. It's a strange follow-up to the original Amityville horror. I have no idea why I own the first 3 Pirates movies. The original was kind of fun to watch, and much better than I ever expected it to be, considering it was based off a crummy Disney ride, but the sequels were beyond terrible. Return to Oz is another one of those children's movies that would be considered much too dark by today's uptight standards. This thing scared the crap out of me when I was little, but I'm glad I got to experience it back then. Today, it makes for a great nostalgic flick. If I could tolerate kids or if I accidentally had some of my own, I'd definitely show them this movie at an early age. Sister My Sister is a movie about a real-life event that happened in the 1930s. I'm sure it's not entirely historically accurate. Much of the shit is often embellished for storytelling purposes, but the movie tells the tale of two biological sisters who became lesbian lovers. And basically, once their affair was uncovered, they committed murder in a vain attempt to hide their secret. As one might expect, the real-life couple was nowhere near as attractive as their silver screen counterparts. Vampire Hunter D and its sequel, Bloodlust, are two more rare occurrences where the anime genre makes an appearance in my movie collection. They're not just straightforward vampire stories, though. These things are bizarre, so if you decide to watch them, you've been warned. The Wrong Turn franchise is up to 6 movies at this point. I've seen 5 of them so far, and the quality greatly diminished with each sequel. The first film is currently ranked at 6.1 on IMDb, and that's probably a fair rating. It's just a bunch of people getting lost in the woods, getting attacked by mutant hillbilly cannibals, your average horror fare. I have a handful of DVDs that are collections of random movies rolled into single packages. Many of these films are pure garbage, but that's what you should expect when you buy these types of sets. They're typically priced in the $5 range. Savage Cinema's a collection of 12 trashy old biker movies from the 60s and 70s. It's a lot of fun if you want to watch a bunch of degenerates cause trouble for no good reason at all. I bought this Vincent Price 3-pack for The Last Man on Earth, but the picture quality isn't the greatest. I'm not sure if there really is a good, clear version of this movie available anywhere. Maybe someday I'll find one. I still have a long way to go in watching all of Vincent Price's work. I've been watching a lot of Herschel Gordon Lewis movies lately. I'm not really sure how this guy escaped my radar for so long. He has a ton of crazy movies in his filmography. The Wizard of Gore, for example, is about a magician who hypnotizes people for his act. He then murders them on stage for the audience's entertainment. The murders are illusions, but yet they're real at the same time. It's kind of difficult to explain. You just have to see it for yourself. I bought the first 5 volumes of the Angry Nerd videos, mainly just to support the guy. There's really no reason to do it otherwise. You can watch all this content on YouTube for free. I just thought I'd toss him a couple bucks, like a donation of sorts. This is a really poor image of my entire Mystery Science Theater 3000 collection. I'm still missing about a dozen box sets, unfortunately. It's kind of hard to read, but you can also see I have a number of Riff Tracks DVDs, along with some Mike Nelson solo work, and the complete collection of the now defunct Film Crew library. I also own 2 cinematic Titanic films. I wish I would have bought the rest of these when they were brand new. These days, they're insanely overpriced because they're all out of print. But overall, these DVDs get rewatched more than anything else I own. I own all the Puppet Master movies except for Axis of Evil. I still have yet to buy that one. These are some of my all-time favorite horror movies ever made. Of course, they vary wildly in quality. Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys, for example, is an absolute joke. I wouldn't even own this thing if I wasn't a completionist. I don't even consider it a legitimate Puppet Master movie. It features Corey Feldman at his worst, and that's saying a lot. If memory serves correctly, he plays the grandfather to an actress who's only like 10 or 15 years younger than him. It's ridiculous. When I was growing up, I had a television in my room, but I didn't have cable. Only the living room TV was hooked up to the good channels. I had to sneak into the living room to quietly watch Tales from the Crypt on HBO while everyone else was asleep. Not every episode is a winner, but the good episodes definitely make the box sets worth owning. Another great anthology series is Night Gallery. It pales in comparison to The Twilight Zone, but it's still a really fun watch. Also, it's from the late 60s and early 70s, so it's chock full of stories about witchcraft and Satanism. Because, like I mentioned earlier, the country was completely obsessed with that stuff at the time. And speaking of The Twilight Zone, here it is, the greatest television show that ever existed. When these box sets were first released, they cost roughly $100 each. I saved up my money like a fiend in order to afford these DVDs. Today, I think you can pick up the entire series for less than $100. Normally, a story like that would get under my skin, but I'm not the least bit upset that I spent so much. These DVDs have provided me with hours upon hours of entertainment. I've always liked watching bad movies, but usually that was limited to films that received the MST3K treatment. It wasn't until Tim Burton's Ed Wood was released in 1994 that I started seeing unaltered Ed Wood movies popping up in the stores. That's when I really started watching bad movies without the aid of Mystery Science Theater whatsoever. Some of Ed Wood's movies are more difficult to sit through than others, but this box set of classic titles is highly enjoyable. Comedy typically doesn't age well, but I still like Chaplin's work even today. The Great Dictator has a lengthy runtime, but it's still a must-see film in my opinion. It's Chaplin at his absolute best. Practically every boy who grew up in the 80s wanted to learn karate because of the Karate Kid movies. My mom refused to let me take lessons because I guess she wanted me to stay a weakling forever. Meanwhile, the kids who were lucky enough to get lessons never really used their skills for anything useful. Think about it. America should be ripe with karate masters right now, but it seems everyone abandoned the practice long ago. I own a lot of Adult Swim cartoons, from back in the days when Adult Swim used to actually make cartoons. These days, all I ever see in that time slot are live-action shows. I guess animation's a thing of the past on the Cartoon Network. I was such a huge fan of the Battlestar Galactica reboot series, I can't say enough good things about the first few seasons. The final season sort of fell short though, and I didn't really care for the direction the show had taken, so ultimately I never bought the final box set. I don't really like Family Guy, but I bought their Star Wars episodes because I found this box set in a thrift store for a couple bucks. They're worth watching once if you're a big fan of the original Star Wars trilogy. Squidbillies is a great Adult Swim show, or at least it was. I haven't seen the newer episodes, so it might have turned to shit, I don't know. I own the first few box sets, and I may pick up more if I find them on sale somewhere. Tim and Eric Awesome Show Great Job is a really polarizing, love it or hate it type of show. I don't love every skit and bit they do, but they're still amusing nonetheless. I probably shouldn't have bought these DVDs though, because I was inadvertently supporting Adult Swim's transition from animation to live-action comedy. The Cartoon Network should be animated only 24/7. This picture came out really blurry, but I'm too lazy to take another one. This is my South Park collection from seasons 1 to 12, although I'm missing season 2 for some reason. Anyway, this is when South Park was good. Seasons 13 and beyond are really sketchy at best. You're lucky to get a single good episode per season these days. Arrested Development was a really good show. I know some people didn't like the Netflix revival episodes, but I enjoyed those as well. It's really one of the smartest comedies I've ever seen. It's kind of a shame that it never received a wider audience. Speaking of shows that got royally screwed by lackluster ratings, The 4400 was a fantastic show on the USA Network. It was unfairly overshadowed by NBC's god-awful Heroes. Even though the 4400 series ends with a cliffhanger, it's still well worth watching in my opinion. If you're a fan of the X-Men movies, you'll probably enjoy the 4400. News Radio was an awesome show in so many ways. It was so well written, it even somehow managed to make Andy Dick and Joe Rogan funny. The series tried to continue after the murder of Phil Hartman, but his replacement, John Lovitz, just couldn't fill the role. Nobody could. Dave Foley, the lead in News Radio, was also a major player in my favorite sketch comedy show, The Kids in the Hall. This show was produced by Lorne Michaels of SNL fame, but The Kids in the Hall never got the same recognition SNL did, unfortunately. Still, it has a really strong cult following. I can't recommend it for everyone, though. It seems to be another one of those love it or hate it type shows. I'm not sure why I still own this Captain N box set. It's a rare out-of-print copy, and it's worth about $200. I really need to sell it on eBay. I'll never sit through another second of this show again. Dead Like Me was an awesome show about a girl who dies and becomes a Grim Reaper. It was canceled way too early. Dexter, on the other hand, lasted far too long. The first 4 seasons of Dexter are fantastic. Season 4 ends on a cliffhanger of sorts, but I suggest viewers just stop right there. Seasons 5 and beyond just steadily fall apart, with the final season being a total disgrace. I own seasons 1, 3, and 4. Season 2 is missing because I had to learn the hard way never to loan people my shit. Here's another old porno movie I didn't have to censor because the cover is quite tame. Long Jan Silver. She was quite a unique lady in the porn scene. I won't explain why. You can do some research online and find out for yourself. I'll just say she would have made a good pirate. I mentioned the science fiction show Farscape earlier. This is the entire television series from start to finish. I believe Farscape is streaming on Netflix right now, so you can easily give the series a watch if you have a Netflix account. I have a couple DVDs packaged in these weird, crappy cases. It came from a small-time mom-and-pop video store that went out of business roughly a year ago. I honestly can't believe they lasted as long as they did. Showtime's Masters of Horror series didn't have many episodes I liked. It was a rather weak anthology series in my opinion. But The Screwfly Solution and Pro-Life were two of my favorite episodes. For only a couple bucks, I couldn't pass them up. I first heard about the Faces of Death series from a friend. He took me to a video store that rented them out, but they were hidden behind the front counter, so you had to ask for them by name. We fell in love with this series, not realizing how fake most of it was. The movies are still worth owning, but only from a camp value perspective. Perhaps one day I'll own the complete set in a nicer condition, but for now, this old X-Rental DVD of Part 1 will suffice. Steel and Lace is a movie from 1991 that never made it beyond VHS. After a woman is raped, she takes her assailants to court. When they get off scot-free, the traumatized woman commits suicide. The victim's brother then builds a robot in his sister's image and sends the robot out for murderous revenge. I'm kind of shocked that this movie never made it to DVD. Battle Angel Alita, or just Battle Angel, is the last of the anime stuff I own. I really loved this cartoon, and I read many of the manga books it's based on. Hollywood's been teasing the possibility of a Battle Angel movie for decades, but I don't know if we're ever going to get one. Only time will tell. I own a box of silent movie gems. It doesn't get more classical than that. And I have a Ray Harryhausen box set for all my stop-motion needs. I have a few Beavis and Butthead episodes on DVD. Unfortunately, almost all the music video content has been stripped from this collection. That was a big part of what made the show so entertaining, and it sucks to see it removed for legal reasons. It also completely blows that the 2011 revival show didn't reinvigorate the B&B franchise. It was canceled almost immediately. It may always be sunny in Philadelphia, but the show isn't always funny, as later seasons have proven. Still, the early episodes are definitely worth watching. Finally, the last bit of inventory here is Penn and Teller's bullshit. This show was amazingly good, but the premise itself couldn't last forever. Penn and Teller set out to expose frauds and scams all around the world, and once it was all exposed, there was nothing left to do but call it quits. In 89 episodes, I think there were probably only 1 or 2 episodes I didn't like. I highly recommend the box sets overall. So that's it. That's my entire library of movies and television shows. If this video is received well enough, I may do periodic updates on future purchases. If you stuck it out this far, thanks for watching. If you have any suggestions for movies I should check out, let me know in the comments below. Later.